All right, so welcome guys to Stateside Street, a podcast where two Americans and a Scot talk all things Corey. My name is Shanika,
I'm Amelia.
and today we are very excited to have Aashish Gadhvi here. He is a director and writer, did a wonderful short film called Free recently. He also did a couple of blocks on Coronation Street in Emmerdale. We are so happy to have him here, and let's everybody just give a warm welcome to Ashish.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we should have like
Okay.
a DJ button when we welcome people, like confetti. Yeah.
Yeah.
Airport. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ashish, we actually have a little icebreaker for you if you're up for that.
I
A
love
little,
breaking some ice.
little, a little rapid fire, if you will.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
First question, the Rovers or the Woolpack?
Oh God, you've asked me the hardest question I'm gonna face all interview. Rovers or Woolpack? I would say Rovers for the history, Woolpack for filming in.
I bet it's fun to film in the Woolpack.
It is fun to film in the Warpack. It's a bigger set, is one thing. So yeah, it just kind of allows for a little bit more maneuvering with the cameras. It's yeah, it's bigger in terms of square footage, but also deceptively packed with lots of chairs.
I've also
So yeah.
heard that those chairs are very like they will trip some people up coming around
I,
that one
I've
door.
I've tripped up a few of those chairs in my time, so yeah, so yeah, that's probably my answer. Rovers is a special place. It's a special set, and you can kind of really feel the history in the room when you're in there. But yeah, I've just had a lot of fun in the Woolpack over the years, so yeah, it's hard to pick.
Okay, another hard-hitting question here. Dingles or the Platts?
Hmm.
I promise we won't tell Jack P. Shepherd, I promise.
Yeah, he will have a word with me. I can tell you that much. I'm gonna have to go Dingles. I'm gonna have to go Dingles. Yeah.
I feel like because I'm such like a Dingle fan, I feel like they would feel like they are just so like funny and they're probably the best people to like direct because they have so many
Yeah,
different personalities.
and they really do feel like a family as well. Especially like when they're all together, when you've got, a good group of them together in one place one time for a scene or two. Most of the time as a director, you're kind of like going in and just giving them a rough outline of what you want them to do, and then the rest you just kind of say, just take it away, guys, and just sit back and enjoy it and watch what they do, really. Because they're just like this kind of symbiotic life form where they all kind of like just slot into each other's presence, and yeah, they just come to life on the set.
That's amazing. Okay, Yorkshire or Manchester?
Dear Lord, forgive me, Manchester.
Manchester.
I'm gonna hear that from a lot of people, but yeah, I love Manchester as a city. So yeah, I love being in Manchester.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee, 100%. Yeah, I'm not a tea drinker at all. So yeah, being in Leeds or Manchester's wasted on me because yeah, I'm a hardcore coffee head.
Sunrise or sunset?
Um, so sunset is every director's nightmare. But the sunrise has really messed me up in Emmerdale Village in the exterior when we've been filming there. So I'm gonna have to go for sunset on this one, just because I've got PTSD from sunrises in the middle of
That
Emmerdale
valley,
Village.
right? It's a valley
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah, yeah. And once the sun's up, and it just keeps moving. So Emmerdale Village kind of has its own microclimate. It's a really strange place. It's like the Bermuda Triangle, just all sorts of different things happen there, and the inexplicable things happen there. And so yeah, the sun moves like 12 feet every 2 seconds. So you could start a take, and by the end of the take, the sun has just moved in a completely different direction, and there's just no explanation to it. So yeah, I'm gonna go sunset as my personal favorite.
But it has to
Also,
be okay.
I was gonna say, is it true that whenever you're filming in like on location in the village, it's basically one big wind tunnel?
Yes, yeah, 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 absolutely. It's one big wind tunnel. And yeah, it just does I can't explain it. It just does all sorts of strange things with the climate. On my last block that I did, we started off the day with like stark sunlight, and then 2 seconds into doing the rehearsal, this cloud of fog just
Oh
descended onto
no.
the village. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the horror movie The Fog from back in the day, the John Carpenter one
Don't,
with the
don't,
Yeah.
it,
don't. I have
well, yeah,
nightmares.
yeah,
I
it
have
just like felt
nightmares.
like there's going to be pirates popping up, like, slashing us all to death any minute now. But yeah, this cloud of fog just kind of descended on the whole village, and we couldn't see each other. So it went from stark sunlight to that in like 10 minutes. It's a very strange place, very strange place.
That has to be like very rough to shoot, especially on like a soap schedule. It's very different from shorts. So having
Yeah,
having
very,
things change, it has to be
very difficult,
yeah.
very, very difficult. Yeah, you just kind of have to hope for the best a lot of the time.
Mm.
Okay, I have three more rapid fire. These are more like personal, so they're not really like in terms of directing. I just wanna see. Beach or mountains?
Um, Beach, just visuals just always look better.
Cake or pie?
Cake.
Dumbledore or Voldemort? I just threw this
Uh,
one in.
you just threw that one in.
Yes.
Voldemort. Voldemort. Yeah. My Harry Potter house is Slytherin, 100%.
I'm a Hufflepuff.
Right, okay, fair enough.
Okay, now your favorite football team.
Ooh, okay, so when I've got a bit of a story about this, and I think people are kind of sick of hearing this story, but when I was a kid, I supported Manchester United, mostly because my oldest brother supports Liverpool, and I wanted to just do something to annoy him, basically, and get on his nerves. So I supported Manchester United for most of my life, but I kind of just grew a bit disillusioned to the Premier League after a certain point, and then started supporting my local club. So I'm born and raised in West London. And so my local club is Brentford, who, if you know anything about the Premier League, ironically, they are now in the Premier League. So yeah, Brentford and Man United are kind of my two teams. Brentford are my local, and Man United my childhood team. But yeah, I tend to follow Brentford a little bit more these days, just because it's a bit less embarrassing. Sorry if there's any Reds listening.
I know nothing about football. I know nothing about cricket. I keep telling Shanika that she
Yeah.
needs to explain this to me.
I've
Well, I mean,
explained. It's
No,
just
you haven't. This is a lie. She is not.
well,
But
working on Emmerdale, it's obviously there is a hardcore Leeds following
yeah,
amongst most of the cast and the crew. So Leeds are now promoted to the Premier League. So
they are.
yeah, it'll be fun going back to Emmerdale at some point during the next year, because yeah, there'll be one or two extra Leeds shirts around, I think, next year.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm a huge supporter of any team right now because I'm like I said, I'm just now getting into it about a couple of years, but I love Newcastle. I think they're a great team. Um and and probably Tottenham. They're a good young team, so but yeah.
Yeah, my sister-in-law's from Newcastle, so she'll be happy to
Mhm.
hear that.
What is your biggest challenge, or what was your biggest challenge going into soap directing, especially coming from doing your original shorts and even just like being on a set with feature films?
It's always the most challenging thing is always the schedules. So obviously the turnaround for Emmerdale and for Corrie, with any soap, it's on every day. So there's a new episode on every day. So the volume at which you're creating the show and getting it ready for broadcast is rapid. The volume is huge, and so on let's say a high-end TV or feature film or whatever it might be, you're typically shooting anywhere between kind of 3 to 5 pages a day. And I always make people's eyeballs pop out when I say on my very first day, on my very first shoot on Emmerdale, I shot 30 pages in one day. So the volume is obviously way off the scale. Now, obviously the shows are created in a way, and I suppose on set they are built for you to be able to shoot with speed. But it's about being able to find that sweet spot between shooting with speed, but also shooting quality television, really, and that's always the biggest challenge. The schedules are always full on, always action packed, but you just have to kind of make it look as good as you possibly can and make sure everybody walks home at the end of the day feeling happy, feeling fulfilled, and feeling like they've done their best work.
Well, I definitely see that. I watched the knife crime storyline in Corey that Corey just had, directed by Jordan Clark, I believe, who was
Mm.
fantastic, fantastic director. Um, it's so interesting seeing the creative. It's quite interesting. You don't really see that dynamic in American soap. So I'm kind of wondering how much creative freedom as a director do you have?
Yeah, you actually do get quite a lot of freedom to be able to do, whatever you want, essentially, in within some reason. Obviously, the audience who are watching have a certain expectation of the show. They have a certain expectation of how things should look, the flow of the show, the kind of the pace of it. It's obviously something that all the audience kind of have the feeling, the loyal fans have it in their bones how a show should look and should feel out of Corrie and Emmerdale. So you're obviously presenting something to them that they are familiar with, something that they know that this is the show that they're watching. But they do actually give you a fair bit of freedom to be able to do most of what you want to do. I when I first started on Emmerdale, Nada Mabadi, the exec producer, said to me, he was like, Ash, if you're not giving us your vision, then why would I hire you again? And that for me was just like, right, okay, got it. That's my remit to basically say, we want to see your version of an Emmerdale episode. We want to see your version of a Corrie episode. So, within reason, yeah, they do give you quite a lot of creativity and quite a lot of freedom. And the shows do allow for you to be able to get creative whenever you can. So, it's just about being able to pick and choose those moments, or when you can kind of have those artistic flourishes, and when, you kind of need to step back as a director and kind of just let the story do the heavy lifting.
And one more question, Amelia. I know you have a question coming up, but you spoke about like the creativity and the freedom that you have, and I'm just wondering if we would watch all your episodes that you put on Corey or Emmerdale, what would be your sort of stamp, like to say, okay, Ashish Gadhvi directed this.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do treat my episodes like they're their own little, Quentin Tarantino type universe where it's like, there's a thread that kind of goes throughout all of them. Um, I do use sound in a very specific way, which, most people kind of watching it may not pick up on, but there's certain clues within the sound elements that I have that have linked my episodes across the blocks that I've done. I hesitate to say that I've got a signature style as such, because then, like, you kind of feel like bound to it a little bit. But I'm known for doing one takes, for basically for doing scenes in one continuous take, and kind of having fairly minimal camera movement, but holding on shots for a lot longer than you typically would in a soap, and just giving the actors a lot more freedom to basically move around as they wish, and to just kind of hold on to the frame for as long as I possibly can. So yeah, that's kind of my signature style, I guess.
What's an example of a small detail in blocking or framing that made a huge difference to a scene?
So there was a scene which is actually oddly enough has turned out to be one of my favorite scenes that I've shot, which was a scene in the Platt's house in Corrie, in which you had Jack Shepherd in the scene, Julia Golding, and then Paddy Beaver in the scene, who they were basically talking about the situation with Clayton, that they were just kind of all discussing it, and that was actually a shot that we did in one continuous take where we just had them all sat at the kitchen table talking, but we blocked it in a way in which people would turn their back to camera and then look towards camera in different parts of the scene, basically. And it just kind of worked beautifully in which way it took your eye between the three perspectives of the three characters within the scene, who are all coming at it from three different perspectives. And you just kind of had one by one of them walking into frame, one of them kind of having their back to camera, one of them then turning the other way. And then it kind of ends with Jack Shepherd in the middle of the frame, who what we wanted for the scene basically is to end it on him to think, what's he going to do next? Because yeah, David and Shona were then going over to the police station to talk to the police about the situation with Clayton. So yeah, that was one particular scene which the blocking we worked really hard on it to make sure that it kind of hit the elements with all three of them, and we were able to just shoot it all in one continuous take, and they basically essentially told the story just with their blocking.
What's one skill that you've gained from directing soaps that you think directors and other genres should learn?
Well, it's going to be one of those things where there's obviously a little bit of not division, but just soaps are seen as like a separate discipline in a weird way to like shooting. There's this term, I don't know whether it's used as much in the States as it is down here, but this term of high-end TV where, things that are like for a Netflix or an Amazon or something like that, they would refer to it as high-end TV. And the soaps, what I realized was actually they have given me tremendous mental discipline to know when you've got a take, and to know when you should move on. And sometimes, I kind of like view other directors and the way that they work and think, you know, do you really need to go for another take, or did you get it on that previous one? Because within soaps, you're always planning your edit in your head, because once you get onto the set, there is no room for error. There's no room for changing your mind on certain things on the day. So, you go in quite rigorously planning every single thing that you're going to do on the set. So, it's that kind of attention to detail before you get to the set that I think the soaps have really trained my brain to be able to pick all of that stuff out.
Thank you for sharing that. That's actually one I wanted to touch on that. If you can, once you get the script, like how fast is the turnover as far as like storyboarding, and everything together. So when are on set, it just flows like a well-oiled machine, so to speak.
Yeah, so you typically get your scripts, and then you have about 3 weeks or so from that point until when you're about to shoot. So in that time, you would then kind of try and rework the script if there's any stuff in it that needs rewriting. You meet with your art department, your costume department, makeup department, camera lighting and stuff, just to kind of talk about any specific things that you want, to really go into the tiny details about any specific things. So, for example, on Emmerdale, in one of my last blocks, where there was a shot in which Georgia J, who plays Steph, finds a gun in the safe in Caleb's living room. And so she opens it up, and I said the shot that I wanted basically was that I wanted the camera to be inside the safe, so that when she opened it up, it would like go be completely black, and then she'd open it up, and then you'd see her with the gun in view. That took a lot of work from the art department. They needed to create a purpose-built safe essentially for us to be able to put onto the set. and put the camera behind it. For that entire block as well, for their storyline, for Caleb, Ruby, and Steph, I wanted to use basically have a film noir type vibe for their whole storyline. So I had to work with my lighting director to be able to get, the kind of shadows on their face, which typically you wouldn't really have in that set. So, we had to light it in a completely separate way. So it involved a few tests of trying to make sure that we got it right, the vibe of it that we wanted. And then yeah, you typically have about 3 weeks or so until you shoot, and the shoot takes generally around 2 weeks or so, give or take.
And for context, just so everybody would know, how long is a typical shoot for like a feature or even just like a TV show that's not soap?
So yeah, it's a little bit how long is a piece of string really, because yeah, I've,
Yeah.
I've worked on various things over the years and stuff, and I've worked on your huge tentpole kind of feature films, which could typically take 6 to 8 months to shoot. And then when you have something a lot smaller, which is going to be for a streaming service or something, it could take about 4 months to shoot. So, it really just kind of depends on the size of the show. But with the soap, it's yeah, the turnaround is usually around like yeah, maybe like 2 months or so,
Mhm.
which is kind of what the turnaround is on that. So from when you actually get the script to when it airs, it's kind of roughly within that remit. Yeah, I mean the soap directors I think are some of the most wily of them all really. When you kind of when I think about some of the mentors who have kind of taught me stuff over the years, you guys will come across these names watching the shows, but guys like Ian Bevitt, Gary Williams, who is amazing, Di Patrick, who is amazing. Matt Hilton, big shout out to Matt Hilton. He's one of my favorite people, favorite directors within the industry. All of these people, in their own ways, are tremendous artists as well as being really good at sticking to the schedule and shooting the show within the schedule and within the given time. And it is an incredibly difficult discipline to learn and to get good at as well, because everybody can shoot quickly if you know how to put a scene together, but it's very hard to be able to shoot quickly and shoot something that is of a very high standard, and that is, dare I say, a skill that only soap directors can do, I think. So yeah, it's a strange thing because yeah, sometimes soap directors aren't really shown the same level of respect as like a high-end TV director or a feature filmmaker. But the skills that we learn shooting soap, it takes a tremendous amount of discipline to be able to learn it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our audience questions now, if you're good with
Sure,
that.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so our first one is from at Underworld Carla, and it says, interested to hear about decision making behind how shots are framed. Example, deciding which framing will be best for telling the story and giving those unspoken cues to the audience based on the script. How much of your framing choice is storytelling driven versus coverage focused?
Um, I I would say, most of it is all story driven. There's obviously certain elements within it if you're up against the clock, and you kind of are trying to get, something in the can as quick as you possibly can, then, you would think, okay, let's just get the coverage right on this next scene and just make sure we've got everything covered so that at least we'll be able to tell the story properly in the edit. But for me, the story drives everything really. So I think most directors would probably agree with me on this on Corrie and Emmerdale, that you start there, you start with what the story is and start with what the perspective is and what the scene is trying to tell, and you build everything around that. So yeah, I would say most of it is probably story driven.
All right, so we have a question from Emma Perry, 22, from Twitter. First, she said she loved the scene with Allison King and Vicky Myers that she directed. And she was wondering how much input do the actors have regarding their storylines.
Um, a fair bit, really, I think. In terms of, the long-term storyline, I'm not sure exactly, over the course of it, how much input they would have. But certainly, with us on set, if it's a me, Ali King, and Vicky Myers on set, we first start with, just opening up the conversation just to say, what do you guys think about this scene? How do you think it should go? How do you think it would play out? And you kind of just start the conversation there, really, and just see where the natural progression takes you to in the scene. So that at least, like, that you let them kind of bring their ideas to the scene first, really, because a lot of the actors on Corrie and Emmerdale, they all come to the set with so many ideas about how everything should play out. And they've been playing these characters for such a long period of time, so that you kind of want to give them as much freedom as possible to be able to say, where if I say, well, I think it should be like this, you want a Vicky Myers or an Ali King to be able to say, well, why don't we try this? And then they can kind of show you that version of it. So I always think, as a director, you kind of want to have a rough parameter of how you want it to be, but then within that rough parameter, you want to give them the freedom to be able to kind of express themselves in that scene. So yeah, certainly I like to give as much freedom as possible to my actors so that they could bring their A game.
So this question is from Tatty0_0, and it says, how much time do you get to rehearse scenes with actors prior to filming? And do you get more time for challenging scenes like some of the ones in the Tom and Belle storyline in Emmerdale?
So you very rarely ever get any rehearsal time with the actors because you just can't fit it into the schedule. And more often than not, when I start on the job and I've got 3 weeks for prep, um, the actors are deep within their current storylines on set acting every single day. So you can't really pluck them out of that and say, let's rehearse instead. The one time I got to do some rehearsing with the actors was actually with Tom and Belle. So that was the one and only time I ever managed to get some rehearsal time in. And for that, we just managed to get them into a little office room within the ITV studio, and just kind of run through the lines and just discuss the ideas. Again, a lot of it is just talking about ideas and saying, what do you think about this? How do you see it playing out? And just coming, everybody is just kind of bringing ideas, and so you sift through all of that to be able to find the right tone. So yeah, but rehearsal time is a luxury that we're very rarely afforded. Sometimes you can make it work, sometimes you can't within the actors' schedules because their schedules are just rammed a lot of the time. But yeah, Eden and James, for the Tom Bell storyline, that was the one and only time I ever got any kind of rehearsal time.
It really just goes to show like how much you have to trust your actors, that the trust between director and actor is just so important, in my opinion.
Yeah, but with these actors, to be honest, like it doesn't take a huge amount to trust them because they're all
Mhm.
so on it.
They're great.
They're all so on the money. They're all so on the ball,
Mhm.
that you're never really worried about any of that stuff. You
Mhm.
always know that they will bring the 100% of themselves to set every day.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's very easy to trust these guys.
Yeah. So Northern Last said they love the scene. Again, a Swaller fan, so they love the scene with Allison King and Vicky Myers. They mentioned they love Carla asking Ryan if she looked okay, those little tidbits. And they were kind of wondering, how do you balance those takes, like those kind of improv with the structure?
So yeah, I mean, like I said, you want to give them as much freedom as possible. So typically, how it goes on set is that you first do what's called a line run. So everyone just sits together and just reads through the script. So you read through the scene, and then once you kind of have read it, you say, does anybody have any thoughts, any questions? Does anybody think that anything should be tweaked here or there? And you kind of open up the floor between, and that the line run is a really precious time, really, because that's almost like your mini rehearsal time. You get a little bit of time just with the actors to be able to read through the scene and for them to just say, well, I think I should do this, or I should do that, or I should add this line, or what if I just tweak this line a little bit, and then you do another line run, and then you get to that point where it feels like it's the right spot. And then once you've done that, you then block the scene out with the actors. So you would say, I think you should come in through the door. I think you should be on, be on the sofa. And then you watch them just kind of walk through it. And then once they walk through it, it again could spring up some more ideas. Would say, oh, I really liked what you did at that spot when you walked over to the kitchen counter. Why don't you do that on this line instead? And so, you kind of like tweak it out with them until the point where everyone's happy. You then show that block, that rehearsal to the whole crew. So you do what's called a crew show. So everybody comes in, all the camera crew, all the lighting crew, and everyone just watches it like it's a theatre piece essentially. And then once the crew have seen the scene blocked out, you then just talk to your crew and you say, okay, I think our coverage should be one camera here, one camera there. You pick up that, you pick up that. And then you go for your first take after that is how it typically goes. So within those stages of how it gets for when the actors arrive to when you actually shoot the first scene, you kind of want to give everybody as much freedom as possible to bring their ideas in. And just most of the time everybody has really clever ideas that they bring in. And yeah, especially those two, like Ali and Vicky, they're always bringing great ideas with them. So, yeah, that's typically how it goes.
I have not watched Free. It could be because I'm assuming it's on the festival circuit right now.
Mhm.
Congratulations for all the success for that being in Holly
No, thank you.
Shorts. It's brilliant. I have watched Mountain of Light, and the themes that you have in that short, it's absolutely brilliant. I really really love it. So I kind of just want to know your creative process, or like would it inspire your original work with your shorts?
It's always just something that's personal to me. I kind of think that the most personal work is always the ones that stand out the most. So for Mountain of Light, it's obviously a high story about the Kohinoor diamond, which is this diamond which the British Empire acquired from India. Um, and we grew up hearing stories about this diamond and the kind of the legend of it and whatnot. And it's something which is quite personal to people from the countries in which the diamond had a lot to do with. So India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, people of those countries kind of know a tremendous amount about the history of the diamond, and yet it's sat in the Queen Mother's crown in the Tower of London. And so that for me it just felt like this is a perfect kind of melting pot for me to create a thriller, a high story basically within that, and then use all of these stories from my childhood, all of these things that we heard growing up, and Free, to be honest, as well, is like we see in the news every day, like stories of small boats and refugees arriving in Europe from various countries. And so again, coming from a diverse background that I'm from, it was about tapping into all of my personal feelings on the subject, really. And just with both stories, it was all about just trying to bring some humanity to it, really. So yeah, I'm not sure whether there is much of a through line on the first instance between those two stories, because one is a very slow lyrical drama and one is a high octane heist movie, but for me they're twin sides of each other, really. So yeah.
So our last audience question is from the Connor Swains, and it says, all scenes are scripted, obviously, but how much leeway do Ali and Vicky have in how they deliver their scenes? Their chemistry is off the chart. As a viewer, this comes from the nuances in their performances, the tiny details that make their characters and relationship authentic.
Yeah, going back to what I said before, you want to give them as much freedom as possible, really, because as a director, I think it's important to know when to step in and when to get out of the way. And often, you want to kind of give just a tiny note here or there, if even that within a storyline. But you really want to just say to it's especially Ali and Vicky, you want to just say like, just take it and run. Because more often than not, they're doing something which you can't possibly add anything to. So with those guys, it is about basically making them feel safe and protected enough to be able to have the freedom to kind of do things in their own way, and not try and impose your vision on the scene as such. Because more often than not, what they're going to bring to it is something that you can't possibly even visualize. So yeah, it's about making the actors just feel safe to be able to express themselves, and about just kind of giving them the freedom to just say, look, if you've got ideas, let's see them and let's talk about them, and we'll go from there.
Like, one thing I wanted to know, going back to the I Have Feelings for You scene, was one thing that, like, I just want to know if this was in the script. After Lisa's, like, have you and Carla smirks, was that in the script or was that Allie being Allie and being like, I'll add this little tidbit in?
Yeah, I think that I would doubt that that note was in the script. I feel like that's just Ali being Ali, really. Um, yeah, it's the scripts we get don't often have a huge amount of stage directions in them. Just because I think that when you are writing for a Corrie or an Emmerdale, you can't really, you know, give too many stage directions because these guys know their characters inside out. I'm not possibly gonna, if I'm writing a script for an Emmerdale, what stage directions am I gonna put in for a Kane Dingle or for somebody like that? You have to just let Jeff Hordley kind of take the reins and do his thing to be able to show you what Kane Dingle would do in that situation. And it's the same thing with Addy and Vicky, really. You can't really give them too many stage directions. I think the only thing that on that day, as far as I remember, the only real discussion we had about was about exactly where the kiss should take place. That was the one thing that we took a little bit of time of, just looking around the flat and looking at exactly like kind of how it would play out. And then the scripts do give you, kind of the time of day that the scene happens. So for us, it was about making sure we understood what happened before the previous scene, and then leading it up to the scene in which they have when they talk about their feelings for each other. So it starts from there, really, with us saying like what would happen in the time from there to there, and then the discussion that happened was, well, I think you would just take yourself off to the kitchen and make yourself a cup of tea, and not turn around and just kind of let her squirm for a bit, let Vicky squirm and just kind of let her be like, trying to win you over, and then just like stretch that moment out as long as you can possibly stretch it out, to just leave everybody wondering exactly what's going to happen next. And then once you've stretched it out, the absolute longest that you can possibly stretch it out, then hit the audience with the smirk, and take it from there.
No, Allie just the scene of Vicky at the edge of the kitchen and Allie with her back to her, like doing the dishes, not turning around. I was like, I watched that and I'm pretty sure I said, Lisa's gonna have to do some serious groveling here. And she
Yeah,
did.
and that
And
yeah,
it
that's
worked
that's
out.
what it Yeah, and that's exactly what we tried to do with it was that, you don't really see Lisa Swain squirm very often. So we were like, well, this is a situation in which you could make her squirm. Um, the other thing about that scene, remembering it, was that when we shot back towards Lisa, and it's the shot of her, just kind of talking over to Ali. The bit of the wall that is in the background is actually part of the wall that you don't usually see within that flat. So typically, the way that a set is structured is that you have the back wall and then the two side walls, and then you basically have it's like a stage essentially. So that's your proscenium arch, and you kind of can have your cameras on the open side of the wall, shooting into the set. What we did with that on that occasion was that we took out one of the side walls and had Vicky standing inside the kitchen, and then shut the back wall up, so that we shot kind of from back to front, if you know what I mean. Um, and the reason why we did that is because, we thought, well, you don't really typically see that side of the wall before because you don't shut that wall off on most occasions. So we thought that this scene merited that. It kind of needs a real difference in the way that the scene looks and feels because this is a big moment here. So, it was about making sure that, that signal was given to the audience that like this is something that you haven't seen before, and that this is something that's new and different in this scenario, and also visually you never really get to see that wall either. So yeah, putting that wall in, I think, kind of helped a tremendous amount, and then having the side wall taken out worked perfectly for when they both came together by the kitchen counter, because then it allowed us to be side profile on when we shot the kiss, because that was the other thing, was that when we kind of talked about what the framing of that shot should be, we wanted them to be kind of, come together in the center of the frame and just be side on, so that they are both kind of equal parts, so that it was as symmetrical as possible. So yeah, that was how we approached shooting it.
Yeah, just all of the work that you've done on Emmerdale and Corey both have been great. Um,
Thank you.
we just want to say thank you again. And before we wrap up, what is a favorite script that you've read?
Favorite script. I think I think most of the directors who worked on the Tom and the Bell storyline have kind of felt lucky to work on it. And I obviously got to do some pretty tough stuff with the two of them. So within the that whole domestic abuse storyline, I shot the episode in which Tom punches Belle for the very first time, and he gets physical with her for the very first time. Um, so that was really tough to shoot. But again, on paper, reading that script, you kind of I remember sitting in the meeting that we had about it with the show's producers and just saying, look, you know, what do you want? What do you want this punch to be like? How do you want to approach it? And it was about it needs to be full on, and the audience need to see it and need to feel it, because this is important. So yeah, I remember that script was one that was a particularly brutal one to read, and brutal to shoot, really. But you wouldn't obviously put a script like that, um, in many people's hands. So, I felt very lucky to have directed that, and felt very lucky to shoot with Eden and James. And I still remember to this day, one of my favorite shots that we've ever done was the shot of Eden in the toilet, by herself. And Tom's obviously, banging on the door, trying to get in, and she's looking at herself in the mirror and seeing this bruise on her stomach, in the window. And we shot the whole thing in one continuous take. And that wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was also about just saying to Eden, again, you've got the freedom to really go with this. And letting her kind of give me the signal to just be like, I'm ready to go, and be like, all right, you're ready, we're ready, let's shoot it.
That's what I loved about that scene. You really allowed her to do her craft, to do what she's best at, and you can, as audience, you can really feel that. So it was brilliant, brilliantly done.
Yeah, I mean, working with Eden is like, one of these things where it's so easy in a way, it's you don't really have to give her a huge amount of notes. She's already bringing her absolute A game throughout the scenes. There was one other scene just in the lead up to the punch that we shot in which they're having a huge row with each other and they're both shouting at each other. And what we did was we just slid the camera from one side of the set to the other, from starting off on James on one side of the set, and the camera just kind of slides over to the other side of the set, and it was just about having this really slow movement that's just kind of, again, really painful to watch from an audience perspective, and just seeing these two just kind of screaming at each other at the top of their lungs. Yeah, it's strange to say a joy to shoot. It wasn't so much a joy, but you knew that, you were getting something really, really good and getting something really important.
Thank you. So I know we're going to wrap up. Just have one more thing to say. I promise I won't ramble or keep you too long. But again, with the Belle and Tom scene, I just have to applaud you again. I love that you didn't do cuts, typical cut scenes. It was like you said, it was one continuous thing, or sliding the camera from one edge to the next, and you really get to feel like you're in there. As an audience, you really get to feel like, okay, I'm here, I'm present in this scene, and it's scary. It's very powerful. So again, I'm not going to ramble on, but I just want to just again give you your kudos. It's just brilliant, brilliant work.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean that was what it was all about, really. It's about, trying to immerse the audience into the story as much as we possibly could, especially with that storyline. Um, because the audience of Emmerdale loves Belle, and we're always rooting for Belle, and she's one of the most beloved characters on the show. And so I kind of thought, and again, this isn't just like from me as a director saying, this is how I want it to be. You have these conversations with the producers and the executive producers of the show, long in advance, to say, look, let's get it, or let's all get on the same page here, and talk about exactly how we want this to go. So, lots of people are involved in the conversation about how we want it to go. And lots of people obviously make it happen, on set on the day. And when the punch did happen, and we obviously rehearsed it with a stunt coordinator and all of that stuff. But the thing that always struck me in that moment was, our lighting director, Paul Norris, just lit the kitchen like it was a horror movie, like it was a slasher or something like that. So that when Tom walks into that kitchen and he's just got his back to Belle on the sofa, it just, you feel the chills, because you're just like, something awful is about to happen here. And that was exactly kind of the feel that it had, and it was, yeah, it was chilling to watch. Is chilling to shoot on the day, to be honest. But again, you kind of knew that what you were getting was something really, really important. So yeah, that's a personal, huge career highlight for me, was shooting that storyline.
Okay, so before we go, would you like to plug your socials and let everyone know where they can find you?
Sure, yeah, I'm at Ash Gadhvi on Instagram. Ash, ASH, Gadhvi's Gadhvi. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to people on Instagram. To be honest, I do my director's notes videos with ITV, so we do scene breakdowns for Emmerdale and for Corrie. And yeah, follow me and see what I do next.
Also, do you have any future work that you can share?
Well, I've got another block of Emmerdale in the bag. So that will be aired, I think the 13th of May, I think is the first episode of that. So it'll be three episodes of that. So I think it's the 13th of May, the first one is getting aired. So yeah,
Very
tune into that.
soon. Very
Yeah,
soon.
not far away at all. Yeah, so yeah, tune into that, I would say.
Well, I know that we cannot wait, and we want to thank you again. Shanika, do you have anything else to
No,
add before we?
just thank you so much for giving us the time. I really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan of your work. I can't wait to see what you do next, whether it be feature films, short films, or just other blocks and soaps. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, you guys just keep doing your thing.
Thank you.
Well, this has been Stateside Street. You all have been fabulous, and we'll see you later.